Next up is the president and CEO of the NASDAQ-listed GRI Bio. Since the company launched in 1998, this gentleman has had over 2 decades worth of expertise in immunotherapies. And please welcome Dr. Marc Hertz. Marc, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Normally, I would be nervous to meet a doctor named Dr. Hertz. I'm sure you haven't. That's not the first time you've heard that, probably.
No, not at all.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed reading up on your past expertise, more than 2 decades worth. And I want to start off by getting your thoughts on the patent estate that you guys have been slowly building up over the years and why that's so important.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you know, I mean, the value in biotech is obviously tied to the patents and the protection that we have for our programs. It's such a long and expensive journey to take a drug from, a concept on the back of a napkin to approval. We're very fortunate in that we have a pretty deep patent estate for our lead compound. It's around medical use, but it's very broad in its claims. And then we have a library of about 500 compounds where we have comp of matter IP for all of those. So we have a good balance of both programs with medical use and programs with comp of matter.
Yeah, and it's a way to stay ahead of the competition too.
Absolutely. I mean, we pour our souls into these companies and bringing them forward, and you have to know that you've got the protection to kind of get your product to where it needs to go.
I want to talk a little bit about the crux of the GRI mission, which is targeting natural killer T cells, which a lot of people see as the acronym NKT. Yeah. What are they, and why is it an effective approach in treating fibrotic disease?
Yeah, so NKT cells are innate-like adaptive T cells. So they're really early responders in immune responses. We're talking within hours. And they're preloaded with cytokine message, and they orchestrate a lot of what happens after their activation. So they're controlling the recruitment and activation of other important cells in the body. And so there's different approaches that people use in targeting these cells. Some are using them as CAR NKT cells to go after oncology and to tap into their very potent pro-inflammatory characteristics. We look more on the inflammation and fibrotic side of the issue. So it's the opposite side of the coin, if you will, from oncology.
I read that caffeine can be anti-fibrotic. Is that true, or is that just a myth?
I hope it's true, because then I'm in a safe place, because I consume a godly amount of caffeine during the day.
Yeah, I thought that'd be interesting to touch upon. Marc, you can talk further about the competitive landscape. Why do you believe GRI can have an impact in your 2 lead indications?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, these NKT cells are very early responders in immune responses. And so we're leveraging the regulation of NKT cells to target earlier in the inflammatory cascade to intervene in these chronic inflammatory and fibrotic conditions. And so in particular, if you look in a disease like IPF, what happens is there's a normal healing process that the body has, that if there's prolonged injury or repeated injury, that healing process eventually turns into chronic inflammation and fibrosis. And once these dysfunctional immune responses are chronically activated, they're really hard to turn off. They kind of have a life of their own. You have to kind of go in and try to reset what's driving those responses. And so by targeting a cell like an NKT cell that sits kind of at the apex or the top of this inflammatory cascade, you have the ability to really, intervene early in that inflammatory cascade and reset kind of the body to homeostasis, if you will. So
yeah,
what I was going to say, in IPF in particular, what you see is that there's multiple pathways that lead to fibrosis. If you're a little bit technical, a lot of it is driven through a molecule called TGF-beta. But there are other molecules that are TGF-beta independent that are also driving fibrosis. And to kind of NKT cells are in this position where they're kind of high up at the top of these pathways. And if you can regulate them, you importantly downregulate TGF-beta, but you also have impact on other pathways that are TGF-beta independent. So the hope is that by intervening earlier in that inflammatory cascade, you can have a more profound effect on disease outcome and progression.
Okay, so before we go, we have about 3 more minutes left. I would love to get your idea of what challenges are facing the industry. What worries you at night?
Well, it's been, just generally biotech. I think 2023 is off to a better year than last year, but it's been a rough go. And I think that the market is looking for companies that have, clear focus, near-term clinical outcomes, and milestones that can help drive, shareholder value. And so, we're fortunate in a position where we have 2 clinical stage programs, moving through to their top line data towards the end of next year. So we have those near-term milestones, but what keeps me up at night is just execution.
Yeah, and what about the recent news about the credit rating of the United States going down from AAA to AA+ by Fitch? A lot of people were making a big note about how tech companies should be worried. What about biotech?
Yeah, so biotech, as you know, we're so dependent on raising money every few years to fund the next stage of our development. But again, ultimately, it all comes back to clinical data. So there are going to be rough times. There are going to be, more optimistic times. But at the end of the day, it comes down to clinical data. And if you can get yourself to those points, I think you'll be okay. It's a storm we weather all the time in biotech. If it's not one thing, it's another.
So stormy weather. You went to University of Colorado. Are you a big skier?
Not as much now, but yeah, I certainly was when I lived there. I got more and more into kind of backcountry skiing and telemarking, and just love it.
Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners who are looking for that next stock and perhaps want to add GRI to their portfolio?
Yeah, just what I mentioned. We're in a rare position where we have multiple important value-driving clinical endpoints coming up within the next 12 to 18 months. So we're excited to bring those programs forward and to kind of keep the market updated as we make progress.
Marc, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm definitely going to keep in touch on NKT cells, and please come by and talk to us again. I'm sure we'll have a follow-up at some point.
I'd love to. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.